Hi, Gary. So it looks like you and I were the only two to tackle the discourse analysis option this time around. So I wanted to give you my response to your post. Specifically, there was a couple things that you sort of said you had questions on, and one of them was sort of how did Tischauser's study line up with the common aims of discourse studies, which are to uncover the underlying patterns and structures of meaning making in spoken and written discourse. And so for in my opinion, I felt like his sort of his study of those 190, I think it was, articles and dissecting them and breaking them down into categories and themes was sort of his way of uncovering those structures and those patterns. I'm not sure if that's what you meant by your question because you were kind of you said you weren't sure how he did that, but I think just breaking down and coding all of those articles, reading them in the first place, and sort of describing the categories and things present that he felt were present in those articles was how he was doing that. Um, so that was your first point. And the other one was sort of double-sided. So you talked about, or you asked about how, um, whether or not, or you sort of didn't think that his use of Patel's paper or use kind of like you couldn't match it up to the use of the word intersectionality. And I think that when we are trying to sort of understand um, where he was going with that, I think if we look at the idea that he was saying that when he was talking about allyship and how um, each of the each or sort of each ally can have a different approach. I think what Patel was talking about um, lines up with intersectionality, right? Because if we look at just in um, so he talks about how Patel's intersectional approach to allyship suggests that one's cross-cutting identity creates situationally specific roles for allies. Definitely, to me, ties into intersectionality because it's the overlapping, right? The overlapping of oppressive states. So, for example, an intersectional or intersectionality would be somebody experiencing, someone is at the intersection of experiencing racism and classism. Well, you know, for an ally, they might not necessarily experience racism, but they might experience that classism. And so finding those areas where they intersect, I think is definitely, it provides, that intersectional relationship. And it's also providing a space where that one specific ally can be an ally. So maybe you might not be able to be an ally when it comes to something like not understanding, specific things that people are going through. But again, if you find those relationships, those those shared experiences that he talked about within that Tishauser talked about within all of the different articles, then that you can find ways to sort of create those communities, right? And so to me, finding those intersectionalities is a good way to help build and create allies. I mean, if you look at just in the ways that you create friendships or groups, it's usually you start with a commonality with someone. And so once you find that commonality, you get together in your group and your group is more powerful. So, as an example, I'm at the intersection of, mom and I don't know, but maybe student or mom and, woman of color. And one of the things I know is that as a mom, that 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 commonality that I share with my mom group, we're much better at getting things done as a group than myself I am as an individual. And I look at it in terms of something as simple as, getting an extra, you know, age group added to a soccer league, or getting getting specific things added to camp programs. I live in a rural area, and it's hard to to get things unless you advocate as a group for them, because the resources are not necessarily there unless you can prove that, hey, there's a group of people who are going to need and use those resources. Um, so that was the one thing that was, I think, the second point you made. Also, you asked about, sort of the poison fruit or something like that. And I think that if you look at it from the lens of, wait, he's using the wrong sort of definition of intersectionality, or he's not using, you know, maybe Patel's whole paper as a lens. He's using just Patel's idea of intersectionality, um, an intersectional approach to allyship, then it's not necessarily poisoned because he's just using one specific idea as a lens or as a framework to guide his study. Um, anyway, I really liked your post and liked how you went off and read a whole bunch of other additional things to sort of gain context. I thought that was really great. And so that was just my opinion on your post. Thanks.